Async tasks are great for a lot of things, but they're not the best choice for updating data in a user interface. For that, we need a loader. Loaders solve the problems introduced in the previous video. First, no matter how many times you request data from a loader, by default, the loader will only fetch the data once. No spawning zillions of async tasks and activities. Second, when an activity is shut down, it'll automatically tell all of its loaders to quit what they're doing since the data won't be used. Finally, loaders persist across activity configuration changes, like rotations. So if we kick off a loader to go fetch data and the phone's rotated, the loader will automatically return its data to the new activity when it's done. Let's look at the developer guide for loaders. These components in the Android framework are specifically designed for loading up data for display in activities, or fragments. I've included a link below so you can read it through in more detail on your own. We'll begin with a section called Starting a Loader. Within your activity, you can start a loader with the help of the Loader Manager. Every Android activity comes equipped with a Loader Manager, which takes care of creating, reusing, and destroying a set of loaders at the appropriate time. Once we get a reference to the Loader Manager, we can now call the initLoader method. This first input is a unique integer identifier. In this case, we use 0. This ID can be any random number, as it only really matters when you have multiple loaders in an app and need to distinguish between them. The other two parameters are 1, an additional bundle of inputs to the loader, which is null in this case, and a loader callbacks object. Now, we specified this for the loader callbacks object because it's common for the current activity, which this refers to implement the loader callbacks interface. So the activity itself is the loader callbacks object that we want to pass in. We'll talk more about the loader callbacks later, but I want you to understand that the initLoader call ensures that a loader is both initialized and active. So if a loader with a given ID, say this ID 0, already exists, then we will reuse that last loader. Now if the loader with the ID doesn't already exist, then the loader callback onCreateLoader method will be triggered, which should return a new loader. Now, it's this behavior of reusing existing loaders that's completely essential. So when we rotate the device over and over again, the same loader will be used instead of creating a new one on each orientation change. Okay, so how does the loader get created? Well, we as the developer are the lucky ones that need to define this behavior. By implementing the loader callbacks interface, our activity needs to override the following 3 callback methods in order to interact with the loader manager. When the onCreateLoader method is called, we need to create and return a new loader object, which will fetch the earthquake data from the web server. The onLoadFinish method is called when the loader has finished loading the data on the background thread. This is a good place to update the UI with the list of earthquakes. The onLoaderReset method gets called when the previous created loader is being reset. So in this case, the data from the last load is now invalid and should not be used anymore. For example, the loader may be reset if we decide to fetch data from a different URL. In this case, then the existing earthquake data is no longer valid. So in this method, we typically clear out the data from the last load, which means we should clear out the earthquakes from the list. Just as a little reminder, when you see callback methods like these, this is a sign that there is asynchronous behavior. So remember that asynchronous means that the system can move on to do other work before the data is fully loaded from the loader. Now, we create a loader only when the system calls us back via the onCreateLoader method. Then the system can go to do other work. We only update the UI when the system calls us on the onLoadFinished with the loader result. There can be a short amount of time or a lot amount of time in between each of these callbacks. In the next video, we'll get into the nitty-gritty details of the code, as well as how to actually create a loader. But for now, I just want to make sure that you understand the high-level benefits of loaders. In this blog post by Google developer advocate Ian Lake, he talks about the best practice for loading data into an app. In this section, he highlights what's so special about loaders. Upon device rotation, even though your activity is recreated, a loader will survive, and the data you just fetched will stick around too, so you don't have to do another expensive network call. And even better, loaders won't stay around forever. If the activity is destroyed, the loader will be automatically cleaned up. They're actually tied to the activity lifecycle and are much more appropriate for fetching data that needs to be displayed on screen. An async task lives as long as the task exists, even if the activity dies. A loader, though, lives as long as the activity lives, so a loader is what we need. Okay, phew. That was a fire hose of information. Now I know it's hard to keep all of that straight in your head, so I've summarized the key points in this quiz, but left the blanks for you to fill in. Go ahead and help me fill in the blanks. What interacts with an activity to manage one or more loader instances? In order for an activity to be a client that interacts with the loader manager, we need the earthquake activity to implement the blank interface. Then, the activity must override the blank method to create and return a new loader instance, the blank method to receive the data once the loader has finished loading it, and lastly, the blank method to handle when the previous created loader is no longer needed unless the existing data can be discarded. And lastly, to start a loader and trigger the loader callback methods when the app is launched, in the earthquake activity onCreate method, we should call what? If you need a hint, I've included possible answer choices that you can pick from in the notes below the quiz. So feel free to reference the documentation links and the loader's developer guide as well.